as we call on the Supreme God, Goddess, Divine Father and Mother. We call on our souls and our divine selves. And we ask today that the session is for the highest good of all, for the expansion of consciousness and in service to humanity. So be it.
So be it. Hi everyone, this is Freya Savitri from Supernal Magazine Australia, and today I have the great pleasure of speaking with Astarte Diana, who is an incredible astrologer, and she's joining us today to speak to the astrological events and processions of the stars and how those things can have an impact on, or impacts on life on Earth. So welcome, Astarte.
Thank you, Freya Savitri, for the opportunity to be here today and share some astrology with you and your readers.
I'm really excited about this because the purpose of this particular interview is to help me to understand, but also to help our readership and viewers to understand a little bit more about what's happening now and what's happened in the past and how did we get there. So in the months of work that everyone in Supernal has done, there's been a number of different things that have come up on many occasions that people keep bringing up, which was what inspired us to look at a bit of a timeline of events. And because we understand the nature of reality is very subjective, because everybody's coming at things from a different viewpoint, a different experience, a different light quotient. There are very few things that bind us in a bigger picture sense. So that's how we came to having this chat. And I think probably the first point to start with is to speak to what astrology actually is and where did it come from.
Okay, so astrology is sort of seen as an ancient art and science, and really it's a study of the heavens, which has been done through observation over thousands of years. And the ancient people were very much in touch with the natural world and the seasons and the cycles of the seasons and the cycles of the moon. And really, they observed these things, and it was integral to their survival. Often, the movement of the planets and the moon and the seasons, and also they they saw the planets, particularly the sun and the moon, which technically aren't planets, but we'll call them planets for today. They saw them as gods. They saw them as beings that were alive and that they were connected with. And over time, the movement of the visible planets out until Saturn was studied, and meaning was attributed to the position of these godlike beings or godlike entities against the landscape of different constellations. And so astrology sort of evolved from that perspective. And in ancient times, it was the role of the astrologer, astronomer, mathematician, priest, advisor, to sort of interpret these movements and to give advice to perhaps the kings or the rulers based on their wisdom or their interpretation. So it has a very sort of ancient beginning, if you like. And over time, that's changed, and more modern astrology, particularly Western astrology, often now has a psychological aspect or a psychological viewpoint, and that's been very much incorporated into modern astrology. Um, so perhaps I could explain a bit how I use astrology, and how I see it being helpful and valuable in terms of the individual and also the collective. Um,
That
so,
that'd be great. So just want to just to recap on what you said then, to make sure I'm understanding what you said clearly, which is that in ancient times, uh, science and the esoteric were one and the same. So because in today's terms, people often think of astrology as is esoteric. Yeah. But at one time, we had a society that followed um, what was provable and obvious, as well as uh, observed patterns that were perhaps less tangible, and that those things gave the overall guidance of where society went.
yeah, I think there was more room for what we would now call the esoteric. There was more room for the spiritual at the beginning of when astrology started to develop. And also, there was the beginning of logic and reasoning and measurement. And so, astrology sort of combines the two, really, because there is quite a lot of measurement and logic to it. It's predictable patterns. There's mathematical emphasis, and there's the intuition and the interpretation as well that goes with it. So at the beginning, when astrology was developing, the mathematician and the astrologer were the same person, so that was sort of more integrated, I suppose, is perhaps how I would see it then. And then I think things became more separated, and so you were either one or the other. You were either the esoteric person, spiritual person, or you were the logical reasoning person, and the two couldn't coexist. And I actually see that coming back together now. That science and what we call the esoteric are starting to sort of come together.
Yeah, I mean, we can see that throughout the world. We've got people like Deepak Chopra, Greg Braden, Nassim Haramein, all sorts of different incredible individuals who are working with the whole picture. It's just an interesting point, so that we can identify that once upon a time, everything was seen as whole and worked together as whole. Somewhere along
Yep.
the line, everything kind of went sprawling and separated, and now it's coming back together. And that's part of the nature of the universe, the expansion and the contraction of things in itself. So that's awesome. Now back to you were saying how it is that you work with astrology, so that people can get a bit of an understanding on how that is helpful for them. Brilliant.
Yeah. So the way I look at astrology, or the way I work with it, is as a framework, and I look at it as a framework for self-analysis, self-inquiry, and self-awareness. And so what I do is use the chart. So the theory of astrology, or the premise, if you like, of astrology, is that every moment in time has an energetic quality or an energetic imprint. Every moment. And so the birth chart, which is what we often work with, the time and place and date that somebody was born, so the moment of birth of a person, has a particular energy or an energetic quality. And Astrology works on the premise of as above, so below. So the whole is reflected in the part, or but the part is reflected in the whole. So that moment in time is reflected in the position of the planetary bodies in relation to the zodiac, so against the landscape of the constellations. And this gives us a map of the dynamics of that particular moment. Now,
and that can be probably quite easily understood for people, because most people have heard of the concept of a holographic universe at this time. So the macrocosm and microcosm of things, and this is another way of how we see that imprinting.
Yeah, that's right. This is following that principle. And so this map of the heavens at the time of birth gives us a set of dynamics that the individual can work with, and can play out during their lifetime if they choose. And the way in which that may manifest, or that might come into being, is dependent really upon the level of awareness or level of consciousness of that individual. And that can change throughout that person's lifetime. And also there's an element of choice. So it's not, I don't work with astrology from the perspective of, well, this is fated, this is destiny, these are the cards you've been dealt, so you must therefore do this.
Yeah, so if I reflect back to the article with Parvati Sundari and myself, we were talking in some depth about the light quotient of people, and how that, as the light quotient in a person grows, then their consciousness expands and their priorities shift as well. So I've heard it said that in regards to a natal chart, the idea, well, the goal is to learn the lessons, to transcend, not transcend in some way, but to go beyond, to embody, to churn it, and then to be no longer in the shadow of it as such, but empowered in it.
Yeah. I think really what it can help do is bring things into awareness. And so often what we do, like within a chart or within a person, we're complex beings, and we often have conflict within ourselves. We might have conflicting needs or conflicting drives. So we may have a drive for security, but we might also have a drive for freedom and independence, and that might seem to be conflicting. And what we often do unconsciously is make a choice, and we say, well, I can't be both. I can't be those things because that conflicts. So I'll choose. And we choose one bit and we do that bit. And then the purpose of our evolution, or maybe even our incarnation, is to become whole and to explore and to play out these complicated dynamics, and to express all the parts of ourselves. And so it's really important to then think about, well, what are they? And so the chart can help reveal that. And we may look at a chart, or we may have a session with an astrologer, and we might not actually agree with what the chart's saying, but at least we're asking the questions, and we're looking beyond the part of us that's chosen to live in perhaps just a small part of who we are. And so the astrology gives us the opportunity to step outside of ourselves and look at ourselves objectively through this map or this chart, and then have this inquiry and this discussion around, well, what are my drives? Am I living out my whole self? And at what level am I doing that? And that's the way I like to work with astrology.
Excellent. That's a very fabulous and empowered way to look at it. And so you you offer people charts, doing natal charts and sessions as well?
Yeah, so I work with individuals on their natal chart or their birth chart, and also looking at what's happening now and in what context are events happening for them. And astrology can also, as well as on the individual level, we can also look at astrology of the collective and what's happening collectively, especially when we look at the position of the planets at any time in history. So we can look at the position of the planets today in relation to the zodiac, and go back over history and see, well, what happened last time Pluto was in Capricorn? What were the themes? Do they repeat? What's this all about? What's this teaching us in terms of the evolution of humanity and the evolution of the collective? And that can be a very fascinating thing to do. So astrology can apply to the individual, it can apply to the collective, it can apply to an event, or so we can apply it to anything really. But I think one of the more popular things is that when we look at ourselves individually.